Okay. Ready, sir.
The flowers in the bowl, so see, I can see. We can dispose of that. We can dispose of maybe we could.
Yeah. Okay, let's start. Let's take our time.
In the last discourse, Shankaracharya was describing the Anatman and the Paramatman. As you would remember, the student asked 7 questions at the very beginning of Vivek Chunamani, and this is the last part of that question. Kosavanatma Paramatma Atma Tayor Viveka Kadam Eva Uchada, meaning what is Anatma, meaning the not self, and what is Paramatma, meaning the higher reality. Tayor Viveka, give me the discrimination or the difference between the two and give it to me in detailed explanation. So that's what Shankaracharya had been doing, and we were discussing that in the last discourse. Now, as you remember, the Anatman, the not self, includes everything that vasana downwards. Everything like vasana, our body with all its sense organs, the 5 elements that go into the composition of our body, the mind with all its emotions and feelings, the intellect with its ideas and thoughts, all these and its modifications, plus all the objects of the world, the sense organs contact the objects of the world. So all the objects of the world, all the emotions that are possible, sadness, happiness, heat, cold, joy, sorrow, honor, dishonor, and all the thoughts and everything, and all the objects that we see in this world, the minerals, the plants, the animals, and the human beings, all these, plus the 5 great elements that go to form all these things. All these things constitute what is called the not self or the anatma. And as you can understand, this anatman is all inert matter, which includes our bodies, and everything that we see around here are inert matter. But yet, it's all dynamic right now only because of the presence of the pure consciousness, and that is the Paramatma. So after describing the Anatman, Shankaracharya has been describing the nature of the Paramatma, and we have described some of them. And what he is talking here is this mass of inert matter that we see, including our own bodies, are able to act in a sentient and a dynamic, intelligent manner only because of the presence of the pure consciousness, the higher reality. Just like life in this universe is possible only because of the presence of the sun. If not for the sun, there will be no life possible on this planet. But the sun is not involved in any of the activities that are going on in here. In the same way, the Lord, Brahman, when he is identified with the body, it appears as if he is the one who is acting, because the body is inert, and yet when we are acting, it is only because of the presence of Brahman in us, the Atman, the Self. And therefore, when we act, it appears as if it is the Atman who is acting. But in actual fact, it is not the Atman who is acting, but our ego that is acting. The example that is given is that the car will not move if not for the presence of the gasoline. It is not that the gasoline is making the car move. All that the gasoline does is that it facilitates the working of the horsepower in the engine, and that makes the car move. In the same way, Atman, the Self, is not the one who is making us act, but in the presence of the Atman, our ego is able to act, and therefore the doer and the enjoyer meaning the one who meets the consequences of the actions. We have already talked about that before. Every action either has a happy ending or a bad ending. Joy or sorrow is the end experience of all actions. The happy ending is enjoyed by the ego. The sad ending is also suffered by the ego. So it is the ego that is the enjoyer and the doer. The sun illumines the objects. If our attention, if you know, see, the sun is illumining everything that we see here now. If we focus on the sun, we won't be able to see any of the objects. But if we look at the objects only, then we won't be able to see the sun, and we don't realize that the sun is the one that is illumining all these objects. In the same way, Atman, the Self, is the one who is illumining all our experiences. If we focus only on our experiences and the objects of the world, we would not be able to perceive the presence of Atman, the Self. Whereas, if we focus only on the Atman, the Self, then we won't see any of the objects, nor would we be conscious of the experiences that we would be going through. And this is what you experience on your seat of meditation. And then an example is also given that, the fire is red in color and it is hot to the touch. An iron rod, if you take an iron rod, that is black in color and cold to the touch. But if you put that iron inside the fire, after a while, that iron rod becomes so red hot and burning that it looks like fire. It would be as if that is fire itself. That is because in the presence of the fire, the iron rod assumes the qualities of the fire. So it is not that the iron rod has become fire. Because when the iron rod is taken out of the fire, when it is removed from the fire, in a short period of time, it assumes its original nature, which is black in color and cold to the touch. In the same way, you and I, as human beings, as long as Atman is present in us, we are dynamic, we are able to act, and we are able to experience all that. These are qualities of the pure consciousness. But when the Atman, the self, removes himself out of us, this body becomes inert matter. Living beings perish, but Paramatman is unaffected. What happens? If Atman, the self, is in me, when I die, what happens to Atman, the self? The idea is again, in this room, we call it the room space. How is it called the room space? Because it is surrounded by these walls. So these walls make the space the room space. What happens if you break down all these walls? What happens to the room space? The room space becomes the cosmic space. The room space was always been the cosmic space anyhow. But we put the walls up, and even those walls were existing in the cosmic space. So when the walls are broken down, the room space merges with the cosmic space. In the same way, when this body perishes, Atman, the self, merges with the Paramatman who is present all over. I am conscious of the waking world, and I am conscious of the dream world, and I am conscious of the absence of absence of all these things in my deep sleep. This I, the Atman expresses as I in all these states, and he is the knowing principle. Now the idea is very clear for us, and it doesn't take a genius to understand this, that we are basically inert matter. But in the presence of Atman, the self, we become dynamic. So if it had been told to us once, we understand that. Why does it have to be repeating it over and over again? It is not because that we are dumb that he is repeating it. Because even though we understand that intellectually, the next moment we assume again that we are this body and we act as if we are this body. Because this understanding does not sink into our conscious awareness. So by repetition, by giving different examples, Shankaracharya is trying to emphasize that fact. And we are asked to contemplate and remind ourselves over and over again that we are nothing but Atman, the self. But under the influence of the Maya, we have come under this delusion that we are this body. So, I'm conscious of the waking world. I am conscious that I am awake right now. When I am dreaming, I am aware as a dreamer of the dream world. And in the deep sleep state, I am aware of the absence of all the activities that were going on in my waking time and my dream time. So the Atman, the self, is aware of not only what is happening, but also aware of what is not happening. So, and this awareness is what Atman, the self, is. With a regulated mind and purified intellect, realize, so he is giving an advice here. With a regulated mind and a purified intellect, try to realize this Atman, the self, while we are in this body itself. Why? Because we are now given a golden opportunity. The animals also have a body, and they are also alive, and they are also moving around. But their brain or their mind is not capable of thinking anything higher than that. You and I, as human beings, we are given this rare opportunity, the capacity to think and figure things out. So Shankaracharya is saying, do not waste this golden opportunity, that you can figure it out, that you are nothing but Atman, the self, and try to remove yourself from this identification with this body. And how do you do that? By purifying your mind. Again, in the last discourse or the one before, he had described how to purify our mind. There are 6 or 7 steps. Adhyata Vairagya, meaning total detachment from everything that is happening. Now, that doesn't mean that you become a sannyas and you give up everything and you go to the Himalayas and sit in a cave and meditate. That's not what it means. Live in this world where you and I have been put in the place where we are placed in. Live your life, but with a sense of detachment, meaning an understanding that this is all temporary. There is nothing permanent about anything, including our relationships with our families and everything. With that understanding, when we go about living our lives, there's a certain amount of detachment that will come to you. It invariably will come in, and that is called the Vairagya. So, Atyanta Vairagya is where you become totally detached. That is, if you are really at that level, where if there is a nice food that is being served, yes, by all means, I will enjoy it if it is given to me. But if it is not given to me, it is okay too. That is the Vairagya we are talking about. But you and I, we crave for that stuff. When we see it, we say, oh, I want to enjoy that. And we want somehow or another get that so that we could enjoy it. That is attachment. So one method is Vairagya. The other is Sama. Sama is self-control. Without self-control, nothing can be possible in the spiritual field. Self-control meaning in every aspect, controlling our 5 sense organs. Our Gurudev says, up in the Himalayas, you get many rishis and Mahatmas who are well controlled, but except in one aspect. They have a big belly because they have not controlled their food. They eat. Whatever that is given, they eat. So they have a big belly. So that is not, self-control. Self-control means all 5 sense organs have to be fully controlled. Then Dhamma. Dhamma is where you prevent your sense organs from contacting sense objects. If you have a desire for something, you don't let your sense organs contact the sense objects. And that's a practice that we have to do all the time. So, Atyanta Vairagya, Sama, Dhamma, then Titiksha. Titiksha is the ability to suffer minor pinpricks in life. Because if we are going to get upset about every little thing that goes on, that's all our mind would be doing. Because there are pinpricks all over in our lives. Every little thing would take our attention, and if that is where we are going to focus, there's no time for higher purposes. So Titiksha is another thing that we need to cultivate. The next step is where you do your obligatory duties. You have duties to yourself, to your immediate family, to your extended family, to your neighbors, your friends, your profession, your town, your state, your country, to the whole world. There are obligatory duties that we have towards all these things. Do your duty to the best of your ability without expectation of any appreciation or reward. Because when we do it with that kind of an attitude, where we don't expect any reward or recognition, we are doing it only for gratification from the Lord. And that is our payoff. So if I help somebody who is suffering out there, and I offer something, maybe I offer him some food or money or whatever it is, my reward for that is the good feeling that I get that I am able to do that. He does not have to be thankful to me. He doesn't have to show any gratitude to me. I don't expect that. I should not expect that. So that is the attitude in all our activities. Act with selflessness. Then the next step is where you study the scriptures a little bit. Read about it, practice the worship of the Lord, do some reflection. Whatever that you read or understand or hear about in the scriptures, spend a little time to reflect upon it and have a self-argument within yourself. How can that be? Why should it be not this way and that way and so on? And keep on going let that argument going on even while you are doing your daily activities. Suppose we are driving. Let your mind do that kind of thinking within yourself. And if there are certain doubts that you cannot solve yourself, most of the doubts can be solved by ourselves when we keep on arguing within ourselves. But there are certain doubts that we cannot. Then you go and talk to somebody who is knowledgeable about that. And then, or you read the scripture. That might open your eyes. So that's the reflection. And the next step and the last step is meditation, where you sit down and quieten your mind, because the quiet mind is where you can access the Lord. So with all this practice, one can actually achieve realization of Atman, the Self, while we are in this body itself. When the truth is realized, the knowledge is immediate. So when we have accomplished all these things, assuming that we have accomplished all these things and quietened our mind, and we are now sitting on a seat of meditation, and we realize the truth. When that realization comes, the knowledge is immediate, meaning it is just like that. All the knowledge that we have now is mediate, meaning it needs our intellect. We use our intellect to understand something. It is hot outside. How do we know? Because through our intellect we are able to understand that this kind of feeling that I get on my skin is hotness. So that is called mediate knowledge. Whereas this knowledge that you get when you realize the self, or when you quieten your mind, that knowledge, that the pure knowledge that we get is immediate. It happens just like that. Man is Atman, the Self, but identifying with the Anatman, he suffers. If you see a man who is drunk, he is not in touch with reality. So he thinks that his shadow is him. So he sees the shadow because he is standing out in the sun, and he sees his shadow there, and he thinks that is him. Can you imagine the amount of misery he has to go through? Because every time a car passes by, he thinks the car is going over his head. Or if his head is inside the gutter on the roadside, he thinks, how can my head be inside? Oh, it is stinking and so on. So the suffering goes on. In the same way, we are assuming that we are this body. And naturally, all the sufferings of the body are ours. Only because we have identified ourselves, just like the drunk identifying with this shadow. You and I have identified with this body, and therefore we are going through all the suffering. This misidentification of not self is the springboard for the bondage and the miseries in our life. In the dream, I forget myself. And I know I'm laying in my bed when I'm conscious. When I lie down on my bed, I'm comfortably lying down. But the moment I start dreaming, I forget that I am lying on the bed. And now I am in the jungle, and there is a tiger that is looking at me and is going to come and attack me. And I try to run, and it is coming behind me, and I'm running, and it's catching up to me, and I'm suffering and I'm sweating. All these things happen only because I've forgotten the fact that I am safe and sound on my bed, lying comfortably there. In the same way, we are suffering, not knowing that we are already safe, because we are Atman, the Self. Same with the people who are on drugs or who are mentally ill. They are also under a different level of awareness. The unreal is that which is not and which shall never be, but only apparently exists. So, real and unreal, real in terms of spirituality. What is real is something that is the same in the past,
ನಿನ್ನಿಷ್ಟದಂತೆನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಟಿರುವೆ ರಾಮ ನನ್ನಿಷ್ಟದಂತೆಲ್ಲ
something that remains the same in all the three periods of time is what is called real. So something that was not there before and something that is not going to be there in the future, but in the present it apparently is existing. That obviously is not real. Like a mirage. When you see in the desert, when you are even on the road, you see water there on a hot day. It looks like water. There was never water before, and there is no water afterwards when you see it. But apparently it looks like there is water. Now, in the same argument, this body was not there before I was born. And this body is not going to be there after I die.
ನಿನ್ನಿಷ್ಟದಂತೆನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಟಿರುವೆ ರಾಮ ನನ್ನಿಷ್ಟದಂತೆಲ್ಲ
Cool. चलने दीजिए.
So right now, the body apparently exists. It was not there before I was born, it won't be there after I die. So therefore, by the definition of the real and unreal, this body is unreal. But we have identified with the unreal. And Shankaracharya says, now you can imagine, now that we have identified with the body, what is there to do? We have to now cater to the needs of the body. You have to feed it 3 times a day or maybe more often. You've got to make it rest. You have to beautify it and keep it looking nice. And we spend all our time. He says we are like a servant who is serving the demands of the body 24 hours a day. No day off. Every day, 365 days of the year, throughout our lives, we are servants who are catering to the demands of the body. And it is not only that we have to cater to the demands of the body, we also have to run after the things that the body desires. A house, a car, power, position, all these things the body demands, and we run after them. Why? Because the happiness of this body is my happiness. This is what we think. So as long as we think that this body is me, then we are sentencing ourselves to a lifetime of misery. He gives the example of a silkworm. You know, the silkworm feels insecure, so it secretes its own saliva and creates a cocoon around it, thinking, that the cocoon will protect it. So it creates a cocoon around it with its own saliva, and it goes on producing the saliva, and the cocoon builds up, and there is a big cocoon that forms around the silkworm. To the point, it does not, after a while, it does not know how to get out of it. It had built a house with no doors or windows. So how does it get out? It cannot. It is stuck inside that. Now the silkworm farmer comes and he sees, okay, now it is at a good size. He collects all that in a basket, and there is water boiling in a pot. He puts all that in there, and the worm gets cooked in there. This is example given by Shankaracharya to say that is what we are doing to ourselves. We create our own cocoon, and we suffer within ourselves, and eventually we perish. But who created it? We blame others all the time, or we blame God for all that. But it is actually we who created all these for ourselves, just like how the silkworm had done that. This wrong idea came to us due to tamas, that whales are intellect. And this happens in our dreaming. The body consciousness goes when you fall asleep. The intellect, due to exhaustion, we are normally conscious of what is going on. But when you are tired in the night and you go to sleep, your body is automatically tired and it is sleeping. So in your dream, the body is not there, only your mind and intellect. But your intellect is also exhausted after doing all the discriminatory work during the waking time. Now in the dream, it is about 80% exhausted. There's only 20% of the intellect that is still working. But the mind is fully working. And that's how all your dreams are there. And there are weird dreams. There's a person with 3 hands, or something happened that you cannot explain in reality, but these things happen in our dream. That is because the intellect is working only at 20%. The same way we are now acting in our waking state, projecting weird ideas and happenings. When I wake up, my full discriminatory capacity returns. Now Shankara gives a twist to the rope and snake example. You know the rope and snake example? When in the twilight, if there is a curled up rope there, I don't see the rope for what it is, but I think it is the snake. And then I suffer. When I think it is a snake, I see all the characteristics of a snake there. I see the color, I see the stripes on the body, and I see the hood and everything. And I suffer because of that. Shankaracharya says, can you imagine if it happened the other way? That it is actually a serpent, but I think it is a rope. And I was thinking, I wanted something to tie up my box here. I wanted a rope to tie. And I looked and there is a rope. And I said, oh, Bhagavan had already provided me. When I wanted something, he provides it right away. And I go and grab the snake. Can you imagine the amount of suffering that I'll be going through if I misinterpret a real snake for a rope? The snake is worried. Why is this guy coming after me? And he tries to run, but I catch it because I think it is a rope. Brahman is ever present in us, and his glory is always there, but gets totally veiled by our tamas. How can tamas or our intellect veil Atman the self? Atman the self is all powerful. So if we say that this Atman the self is in us, but it is veiled by our intellect, or tamas is veiling it, how can a powerful thing like the Brahman be veiled by tamas? How is it possible? He gives the example of Rahu. You know Rahu, the time that the solar eclipse, the sun gets obscured by a shadow, a round shadow, which is the moon. Because you and I are observing the sun. The sun is out there, and we in the earth are observing that sun. The moon is another planet, but it is a small planet. And it, as you know, the earth is moving around the sun all the time. So is the moon. The moon goes around the earth, and both the earth and the moon go around the sun. So at some point, when the moon comes in between me and the sun, it obscures my view of the sun. That is the solar eclipse. So it looks like as if the sun is there and a round object is coming slowly and it is engulfing that. So in Hindu mythology, it is called Rahu. Rahu is a big serpent. So it looks like a big serpent is coming and swallowing the sun. But Rahu is not a serpent like a normal serpent. It only has a head. It does not have a body. So when it engulfs the sun comes out the other way. So that is the eclipse. So in the same way, if you and I, if we are looking at this world, let's say you close one eye and you look only through one eye at this whole universe. Then you bring your little finger and bring it close to that eye that is open. this whole universe that is in front of you becomes obliterated. You cannot see anything. Which means this little finger is able to block all the things that are out there. This whole universe out there in front can be blocked by this little finger if it is close enough to my eye. In the same way, the Lord Paramatman is out there and He is in us as Atman the Self. But our thumbs can veil it by this example you can understand how it is possible. The moon is the presiding deity of the mind. In the Hindu mythology, the moon is the presiding deity of the mind. So that's why the mind is blocking us from contacting the Lord. He is the one that is blocking, just like how the moon obstructs the sun. The moon is a small planet, but yet it is obstructing the sun because it is close enough for our view. And that is how it is blocking the sun and we see the eclipse. In the same way, this Brahman is absolutely from us by this. The mind is a manifestation of avidya, the non-apprehension of reality caused by tamas. Transcend the mind and realize the self, and all the sufferings will end. Due to this veiling of the mind, the man comes to identify with the gross, subtle and causal bodies, and then the 6 negative tendencies. Once the mind is veiled by tamas, we get all the 6 negative tendencies: kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada and matyasya. Kama is desire, extreme desire. Krodha is extreme anger. Lobha is greed. Then moha is delusion. Delusion, that thinking that everything is real and then we go after those things. Mada is passion. And matsya is jealousy. These are the 6 bad feelings that we get when our intellect gets veiled. And these generate strong dislikes and likes. The vasanas cause strong likes and dislikes. Our Gurudev says, Lord had created us with a beautiful world out here to live. But we create our own likes and dislikes. We like something and we don't like certain things. And therefore we have divided the world into 2. Things that I like and things that I don't like. And I go after the things that I like. And I run away from things that I don't like. The irony of life is, when I go after the things that I like, those things keep going further and further away. But I keep on running after them. And there are things that I don't like and I want to run away and they keep following me. This is the irony of life in everybody. So this is the kind of life that we have created for ourselves. The Lord has created a beautiful world for us to live. We create this, segregation and suffer. Vasanas keep us tossed about like a boat on the ocean. If there is a boat on the ocean, every time a wave comes, the boat is just tossed about back and forth. We are like this in this ocean of samsara. We have no control over what's happening. We just go about back and forth. The last thing he says, that is, Shankaracharya says, is the tree of samsara. He likens our life to a tree. This tree came out of the seed. What is the seed? Our vasana. Our vasana is the seed that caused the tree. The ignorance, avidya, vasana is the seed. The body identification is the sprout. So once this seed had been planted, which is the vasana, it gives us this identification with this body. It gives us this misinterpretation that this body is me. So that is the sprout that had come out of the seed. And out of that comes desire. Those are the tender leaves. From this body identification, I get desires to get various things. Those are the tender leaves that come out. Then actions are water. Once I get a desire, I want to be involved in actions to get what I want. Then that is the water that feeds these tender leaves. Pranas are the branches. The pranas, the branches are the ones that get the nourishment and provide it for the tree so the tree can grow. So the prana, the five physiological activities that are in our body, are the things that keep our body going. The sense organs are the twigs. In between all the branches, if there is a tree and there is a branch, in between the tree and the branch, there is always a twig that is waiting to come out. If you cut this branch off, that twig immediately comes out. And those twigs are sense organs. And the sense objects are the flowers. The flowers that come out on the tree are the sense objects. And when the sense objects, when the flowers wither off, you get fruits. So there are fruits on the tree, and our ego is the bird that goes around eating the fruits on the tree. And when it has exhausted all the fruits that are on this tree, then it leaves this tree and goes on to another tree. And that's what happens to this ego. So he likens this to a tree. And in the example he also says, now the desires are fed by the actions. As we said, our desire, when we get a desire, we involve in actions to get our desires fulfilled. If you don't do any action, that desire doesn't get fulfilled. And eventually that desire will die. In the same way, the tree, when you don't water the tree will die. So in the same way, you don't indulge in actions. Now if you have to do actions, Shankaracharya says, suppose the tree has to be watered, but you don't want to really water it, you add a few drops of acid into this water. That will kill the tree right away. In the same way, what is the acid that when we want to act in this world with desire anyhow, add a little dedication to the Lord. So when you act, you think of the Lord in every action. That way it will make sure that your actions are noble. And add dedication to your action, and that's called the Nishkama Karma. So these are the advice given to us. We'll continue with this